Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our fall Monarch Regional Advisory Committee meeting. Before we get started on our presenters today, I'd like to just go around the virtual room and introduce ourselves. We're a small group, so I'll just call on you guys to unmute yourself and introduce yourself. And this will also be the chance to give any updates if there's anything you want to share. So Jana, you're a presenter, but I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jana, and I am at Moorpark College. I'm actually tenured with biology, but I'm on permanent loan to the teaching zoo there.
Permanent loan. Fancy. Antonio Sanchez. And I think you have something you want to share with the group too. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay. I promise I won't Zoom bomb the meeting. All right, there we go. Hey everyone. Yeah, my name is Antonio Sanchez. I get to work here in the Santa Monica Mountains. I run the native plant nursery here at Rancho Sierra Vista Newberry Park. And just wanted to take a second real quick to let you guys know. I think a few of you probably know about some of the programs we have, specifically the milkweed programs we have. Right now, we have a program funded through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and it's about to end December 31st, but we've been able to grow 100,000 milkweed, actually a little bit over 100,000 milkweed. So we've given out over 50,000 milkweed the last 2 years to places all over LA and Ventura County. And then we're going to install probably about February, the last of our 50,000 milkweed here in the Santa Monica Mountains. So part of that grant is this conference that we have. It's been written into the grant. We did the conference or the symposium before we had the grant, but we're just tagging it on as part of this grant. So we have this online 3.5-hour symposium or conference this Saturday. And if anyone's interested, we'd love to have you guys join. Leaders are Ventura County folks. A few of them are from outside of the county. We got someone from Xerxes. We have a woman who's was featured in the LA Times recently about just converting her garden into a pollinator garden and kind of the transition she went through with her life to kind of incorporate milkweed and monarchs into her garden. We got Greta from the Ag Commissioner's office. You guys probably know Ventura County was one of the first counties in California to outlaw or to prohibit the growing and selling by nurseries of tropical milkweed. So Greta's going to give an update about that. So it should be a cool conference. If you guys have any questions, would love to answer them. If not, the QR code's right there. And you can find all of that information on our Eventbrite page, our Santa Monica Mountains Fund Eventbrite page. That's SAMO Fund Eventbrite. And happy to answer any questions if that's cool. If not, we can do it afterwards.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Antonio, are you okay with us sharing this with our networks?
Yeah, not only would we be cool with you sharing it, like if you guys get people registered, I might pay you like $1 per person that registers. So that's in the funding too. I'm just kidding, that's not in the funding. But yeah, the more people you can.
I was like, how did you write that in your grant?
Yeah, called the headhunter's fee. Yes, yeah, I just email. So please, if you'd like to, if anybody wants an email, just drop your email in the chat and I'll be happy to email it to you guys.
Well, thank you
We
so
can also
much.
share it. We can also share an Instagram flyer if anybody's interested. We can just tag you through Instagram.
Okay, I see some people are sharing their email in the chat too to get that information and pass it along. Oh, Julie, you have a question?
Great. Yeah, hi everybody. I know this is pre-introductions, but Antonio, hi, good to see you.
What's
I
up,
have
Julie?
one question. I scanned the
Yeah.
barcode and it goes straight to registration. Do you have a link you can share where I can help promote this for $100, like 100 people? You can give me? I'm
Yeah.
teasing.
If you get
Okay.
us 100 people all at once, that's $200. This is all fake Monopoly money, by the way.
Yeah, that's okay. It
You
burns
know
the
what? My coworkers are on the call. They're listed under that beautiful oak, under Santa Monica Mountains Fund. They're the ones who helped organize this. They took the lead on that. Maybe they can answer that. Maddie, Kaylee, could you guys answer that question?
Hello. Hi everyone. We're the milkweed team. And yeah, we're trying to put together this conference and have people attend and learn about the state of milkweed and monarch conservation and avenues that people can help and join the mission as well. So this is
I
a
don't
great
know if you
meeting.
guys heard the question. The question was, do we have a link that we can share besides the QR code?
Yeah, for the flyer, for the event flyer.
Yeah, we have an Eventbrite page that we can share on the chat, or we
Great,
can put it out as well.
thank you.
And Georgia, your hand is raised. Georgia?
I think you're on mute, Georgia, if you're trying to speak.
Well, I thought, is that better?
Yes, we can hear
Oh,
you.
sorry about that. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. And thank you, Antonio, for all the really terrific work that you do. And I just, for a second, will digress. And I think my first connection was through, and I've forgotten the name, Ryan and the other woman at the Grow Native Nursery, which I frequented as much as possible. And it was just terrific. So thank you. Yes, and so now I've come across a new organization, and I've already talked to them about you, even though I've just met them. You may have seen them in the newspaper. They're called Crop Share, and they are amazing. They grow, and you can read the, oh, gosh, I'll probably have to find it because I couldn't, when I searched for it, I couldn't find the article, which is unusual, but it was like almost a full page. They're an organization which grows on individuals' yards, tiered, and there's better names for it. I just don't know what they are. Tiered boxes to grow crops, and uses like much less water than the lawn. And then what they do, they have a system for sharing because they produce so much that they couldn't possibly use it all. So I thought if you thought it would be appropriate, I'd like to introduce you. And also I'm wondering if you think that some milkweed disbursement would be appropriate. Currently they're in, oh gosh, it's Los Angeles. It's a certain area in Los Angeles. So they have like over 300 requests already to establish this in people's yards. And they're around 8th and something or other. I'm sorry, 8th and Wilshire, sort of in that area. So they're trying to confine it. So also by, this is their area, but they are teaching people how to do it in different areas. And they will, so that they reduce the transportation burden, you know, for transporting the crops. And I just think you probably have a lot in common with them. And I'm just wondering if you would be appropriate to introduce you and say you might be interested in giving them some milkweed.
Yeah, of course, 100%, Georgia would be interested. And again, I'll pay you the $100. I think it's
Oh.
just $100 for every name that gets passed my way is $100 today. Yeah, for sure. And we can't guarantee that we have milkweed, but we have seed, and we can work with them for sure. But that'd be amazing. Thank you, Georgia.
Great, thank you.
All right. If you do find that link, the article, if you could drop it in the chat, it'd be great. I would love to read it.
I'm gonna find it.
Okay.
Yeah, Georgia,
Thank you.
Trent is asking in the chat if it's possibly a group called Crop Swap LA.
Oh yeah, it is Crop Swap. Sorry about that. It is cropswap.org. And I just want to say too, I really loved their website. They had this really great, they're opening up a new garden, a giant ribbon curled across it. It just looked great. And then when you look at the pictures, I will say, of the, the people who started it and their story, it's just really heartwarming. Just truly like what we thought it was all supposed to be about. So, yeah.
Any other questions for Antonio? Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Antonio, for sharing that. We'll go on with introductions. Georgia, since you are already unmuted, and you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. Well, let's see, what have we done? Well, I do have missions, and they all kind of coalesce around, habitat. I will say we went to Butterfly Day at the Mermaid last summer, and our focus this year was on invasive plants. So we took a bucket of.
Georgia, for people, because I have some new employees here, can you like introduce like who your we is or your?
Excuse me. Yes, of course. I'm part of the Malibu Monarch project, and we've been around for more than a decade, and our mission has been to to help reconstitute the monarch supply, and we've done that through plantings and also participating in the counts and just advocating for preservation of habitat. So those are our missions. And of course, gathering all the current information that we have. So Butterfly Day is at the Mountain Mermaid. I'm sure some people know of it, but maybe not. It's in Topanga, and it has a storied history that is quite interesting and wonderful. But now they host a Butterfly Day once a year with lots of local people. Well, the year before before the landslides closed it, they had, I think, 2,000 people. So they do really reach a lot of people. They have booths and information about native plants, and Poison-Free Malibu is there, and just lots of different groups and associations, and they sell native plants too. So yeah, it's a whole day. What we found, we cut the beautiful blooms from the invasive plants, and we brought maybe 10 or more of them and asked people what they thought of them. And do you think that any of these are invasive? And which ones do you know? Well, they knew mustard, and that was it. Person after person. So there is a huge gap, in my opinion, because these people are people who you might think might know about this and certainly care about it, but they didn't. I mean, they did care, but they didn't know. So I proposed to a few of them, well, what if you had somebody come by and flag, because of all the clearance issues, and flag the native plants that pop up between the weeds before you clear it? And they were interested in that. So that is one thing. Then the other issue is the abject lack of information about, I don't understand it, but about the risks of living in the chaparral and what will actually help you if there's a fire. There's no information about the problem of invasive plants and how that increases wildfire spread. And there's the misinformation that clearing all of the chaparral is going to protect them. So, and then thirdly and last, there is county ag, which in this area is one person who's the kind of critical factor, is convinced that the more you clear, the better. And in fact, The only place that survived in the Woolsey fire was the prison out there for juveniles, and they had 300 feet of clearance, and so therefore 300 feet of clearance is good. This is a huge battle and is really instrumental in promoting wildfire because the invasives never get cut again. And there's, if you cut them enough, the invasives just keep coming back and the native plants will wear out. So those are the issues I would like to have some help on.
Thank you, Georgia. Perhaps at a future meeting, we can follow up and maybe learn what specific challenges you guys have had and also brainstorm ways that could help. Chris Ament, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Chris Ament. I am the founder of Native Monarchs. I have a lot of native milkweed growing in the greenhouse right now, and I've also been awarded a couple of grants that are coming through in the next, I think, couple of weeks. So if you have any sites that you need native milkweed in plug form, you can always give me a call. I'll put my number and my contact information in the chat. But I'm still continuing to plant habitat in open areas and landowners that are signing up for it, and then also working with some of the farmers on some of the NRCS opportunities for monarchs, you know, for pollinator habitat rebuilding on agricultural lands. It's a challenge because of the paperwork. I'll just be completely honest with that. But I have a lot of organic farmers that are interested in doing something like this. The habitat at Sterling Hills remains successful. So we had a lot of breeding there. This as much as could be, even though the population, I think, count is down. And then also we have other projects that are going on at Channel Islands University. So that's going to be really interesting, getting the biology department involved, as well as some students, where we're actually doing larva monitoring on all parts of the campus where we've identified native and stands of tropical milkweed, unfortunately, but we have to learn how to, you know, work with facilities and how to manage that as well. But the events keep going on, and I'm just keep going on.
Yeah. Thank you. Chelsea, I know you just joined, but if you're comfortable, could you please unmute and introduce yourself?
Get that in there. Sorry. So my name is Chelsea. I'm down in Lemon Grove, California. I work through a couple different grassroots organizations. One of them is the Monarch Fellowship. And I also run something called Busy Bee Garden Co-op here in Lemon Grove, where we install native pollinator gardens around our city.
Oh, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. I had done it like that in case a work call came in, and then I would have to mute you.
Oh, no problem. I get it.
Yeah. So
Hillary from CDFW.
Hey all, so I'm the pollinator coordinator with CDFW, and periodically I try to jump into some of these regional meetings just to hear what's going on. So yeah, it's great to hear what everybody's working on. I also facilitate with Xerces the Monarch Plant Materials Work Group, and recognize some folks like Chris from that. So yeah, it's good to connect, and Antonio has participated actually a lot too. See what's going on in your region.
Thank you. Julie Clark.
Hi, all. I am with the University of California Cooperative Extension based in Ventura. I work regionally mostly on pest issues and natural resource matters in Ventura County and the Santa Monica Mountains. Our updates are that I have a couple. Last year we relocated our research farm, which had been in Santa Paula for 25 years, to a larger parcel in the Oxnard Plain in Camarillo. And in the process of getting settled there and establishing our research plots and crops and facilities, we will soon be embarking on a partnership with Cal State Channel Islands to have both an apiary project and pollinator gardens that are permanent at our farm. It's a 125-acre farm. And we're surrounded by cropland not too far from Sterling Hills. And also, Chris may have mentioned in the past that there's a corridor, there's a wildlife corridor that goes through Sterling Hills, north-south corridor. It's well documented, and it happens to go through our farm as well. So we're looking forward to the benefits of being in that wildlife corridor and helping augment the Oxnard Plain and the ambient areas. We also had a Master Gardeners program. Antonio does work with the Ventura County Master Gardeners at his nursery, but we have another Master Gardeners project that used to only focus on emerging tree pests, and now they've expanded to include beneficial insects and pollinators. And our new recent graduating class of 2024 has jumped up. We've had a lot of recruits into the project, and they've been doing outreach, and they have to several community events and have lots of ideas for new projects and outreach as well. So, and I would like to add a tag along to George's comment, and the idea is maybe having speakers speak to invasive plants in the future. Georgia, our offices have well-established relationships with both counties' fire departments, Ventura and Los Angeles counties, as well as the agriculture commissioners. And we can talk offline about this, but our contacts with all 4 agencies are a bit more progressive on the current science than whomever is your contact. So happy to work with you and bring presenters for the future programs of MRAC and deal with issues that you're having in Malibu and the Santa Monica Mountains.
That'd be great, Julie. We'll definitely be reaching out to you for help trying to set that up for a future MRAC meeting. Nadia?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nadia. I am the Conservation and Science Associate for the Santa Barbara Zoo, and I help to manage all of our field conservation programs and the zoo's participation within them. And since 2012, we've been helping out with the Xerxes Society overwintering counts for the Western population, and so that's really kind of where I come in the monarch world. Happy to be.
And you'll be presenting later too.
Yeah, and I'll be getting more into that later. So that's just a preview of coming attractions.
Thank you. Paola, and please correct me.
Hi everyone, my name is Paola. I'm the assistant manager at the nursery here at RSV. I work with Antonio. I'm just here to learn today.
Thanks for joining us. And then Santa Monica Mountains Fund, it looked like there was a small group of you guys.
So we are the milkweed team for the Santa Monica Mountain Fund. Meta, Kaylee, and Madison. We're just here to sit in on the guys' meeting today.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. And then Trent from the Santa Barbara Zoo.
Hey everyone, I just got my camera off. I share an office with a lot of people, so in and out and get all blurry and stuff. Yeah, I'm with the Santa Barbara Zoo. I'm also with the teaching zoo at Moorpark College, so specifically with Dr. J as well. and Nadia then, a little confusing there. My involvement with Monarchs is on a little bit different level than Nadia's. I serve on the steering committee of AZA's Monarch Safe program, which basically is unification of our 240 accredited zoos across the country, actually across the world, on sharing information and resources on conserving monarchs. And then I try to get boots on the ground and help out Nadia and the rest of the zoo team doing all the counts and all the other on monarch activities. And I have a little bit of a different role at Moorpark, but I am trying to take some of my experience and knowledge into the monarch and conservation and spread it over there to the students as well. And I will leave Dr. Jay and Nadia to do all the updates as well later on different programs.
Thank you, Trent. I realized that I probably should have introduced myself first. I was just talking to all of you guys. But my name is Heidi Ortloff, and I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator at the Ventura County RCD. I do a lot of the admin stuff for our Harmony project, which is our monarch restoration project, and a lot of our education and outreach on monarch butterflies as well. So that's why you're seeing me here. But I have two new coworkers who are also joining me. So I'll let them introduce themselves. You're good.
Hey guys, hi, I'm Jaya Weavy. I'm the new RCD member. I'm the conservation ecologist here. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and work with you guys and kind of learn about everything. My background is in native restoration work, so I've done tons of planting and like maintenance and monitoring of like the native plants. So it's cool to be able to working with the smaller insects and helping that out as well. So,
yeah. And then Rachel over here. Get it all in 10.
Hi, I'm Rachel Ray. I'm the new restoration technician for the RCD. I've done a lot of restoration work within Ventura County. So worked with a lot of invasives and natives planting wise. And I'm just kind of excited to hop on these Harmony monarch pollinating project that we have going on here and learn a little bit from you all. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we can go on to our first speaker. It's going to be Janet Johnson with Moorpark College. At least that's how I met her through. I feel like she does a lot of stuff, but she's going to be talking to us about some of her conservation work with an endangered butterfly.
All right, so let me get my chat room rearranged. Sorry. When I started the share, it scrambled my screen. So I am going to talk to you about a different butterfly today than the monarch. I'm going to talk to you about a Lazarus species. It's the endangered Palos Verdes blue butterfly, and it is a cooperative conservation species. I'm going to take you through the organism and then the effort and then the results and then where are we going from here. So the story of the Palos Verdes blue butterfly begins about 10,000 years ago when it became isolated from its closest relative, the southern blue. And it is isolated on the Palos Verdes Peninsula, so down here by Long Beach. Because it is restricted to that island coastal terraced ecotype, that did lead to its reproductive isolation and therefore its birth as a unique subspecies, but it is also leading to its demise because that is a very small restricted area. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of development going on there. So the historic range for the Palos Verdes blue butterfly is just 12,000 acres. And I need to emphasize the fact that it was never common. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rabinowitz's 7 forms of rarity. But the Palos Verdes blue would have been a form 6, and that it was very restricted in geographic isolation. I mean, in range, it's just on the Palos Verdes Peninsula, and it is a specialist. So it was described as only being on rattlepod. We've actually shown now that it uses deerweed as well, but it's still very much a specialist in how it's using the landscape. That being said, it used to be abundant on the peninsula. And the problem came that we shifted from Form 6 of its natural level of rarity down to a Form 7. And it's that shift, and that was driven by us, by humans. So as you watch the peninsula develop through time, one of the pieces of the peninsula does not look developed, and that is because it's the Defense Fuel Support Point in San Pedro with the circle around it. Now, that is a unique situation because it was set up during World War II, and those tanks are buried. So this is me. It's now closed down, so now they allow you to take pictures of it. But this was when I was snapping a quick picture out my window to demonstrate that the tanks were buried underground. So I'm standing on a tank here. There's another tank to my left. This is another tank. And the reason that they were buried is that in World War II, they really thought that Japan was going to come over and bomb the tanks. And that would have been really bad because this fuel depot was providing fuel to all branches of the military from Canada down to Mexico and inland all the way to New Mexico. And so that, if that was bombed, World War II would have gone a lot differently. So they buried them, but they didn't landscape them. And you definitely couldn't build on them because they were just big tanks of fuel. Now, what moved in there was a lot of native species. Keep that in mind. I'll get back to that. The Palos Verdes blue was described as a subspecies in 1977. In 1978, it was proposed for being listed under the Endangered Species Act because they were down to 12 populations. By 1980, it was listed as endangered. And in 1983, it was presumed extinct. The last three populations, two of the populations were up for development, and each of them said, we can develop this land because we have these other two populations. And this one said, we can develop this land because we have these two populations. So we went from 3 populations to 1 population overnight. That last population was in Rancho Palos Verdes, and it was wiped out for a baseball diamond. When they wiped it out, there were huge protests. They knew it was there. They knew it was the last population. And they just really wanted an additional baseball diamond there. And I'm not against baseball. Baseball's cool. But we have to think about where we place those diamonds. And then there was a really interesting man, Sam Hohala, who is now retired, who tried to prosecute them for Fish and Wildlife. And he walked in and he served them and he said they laughed at him. And if you want a picture, I don't have a picture of him, but he was a cross between Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Just really intense guy. And he walked in to serve them papers and they laughed until they realized that he was serious. And then they hired a really, really good lawyer. And the lawyer argued that he had charged Rancho Palos Verdes. And at the time, the Endangered Species Act did not cover entities. It said person or persons. And so even though they intentionally wiped it out and knew it was there and knew it was protected, there was not $1 in fines. There was not a day of jail time because at the time there was that loophole. Now the Palos Verdes blue is the one that closed that loophole so that now the ESA covers entities like cities and municipalities. So very proud of that. So 1983, presumed extinct. There are a ton of entomologists in LA and they crawled all over the area trying to find Palos Verdes blue, could not find it. There was one place that they could not go. And that one place that they could not go was DFSP. DFSP, being a military base, had a military fence line defended by MPs. Not only that, but this right here is an open air shooting range for LAPD. So Where they finally actually rediscovered the blue after roughly a decade of presumed extinction was on this hillside, which is a buried fuel tank behind a military fence line with LAPD laying down cover fire into the habitat. That's where they actually rediscovered it. Now, who rediscovered it? Rudy Matoney, who is my predecessor, and Rick Rogers. And the reason they even got to go on the land was because they being the military, needed to put in a pipeline. And even though it was presumed extinct, they had not taken it off of the list. So it was still protected in case it was rediscovered. And so very quickly, they had to do that EIR because that was habitat. And then they found it and it instantly kicked in all of the goodies that go along with the Endangered Species Act. So that last population was estimated at 69 wild individuals. And that's when the effort starts to try to recover it. At that point, you would have the US Navy, because the Navy owned the land. Technically, at the time, because it was a fuel depot for all branches, you would also have the Army, the Air Force, and what's known as DLA, Defense Logistics Agency. So it used to be when those tanks were still functional that you sat down with all branches of the military, which was pretty exciting. And I will let you know they are fabulous partners, despite the fact that that was not their primary mission. They do a great job of going above what is expected every single time. Then you would also have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because it was listed. These two entities are nonprofits, and the Urban Wildlands Group oversees captive rearing and surveys of the wild population and surveys of habitat. The Palos Verdes Peninsula Land Conservancy oversees the restoration of land. So those are the four entities that we started out with. It is a cooperative conservation effort, and there will be more groups that join in as we go through time. From 93 to 2003, it was run by my predecessor, Rudy Matoney, who was a professor at UCLA. And he was amazing. He's no longer with us. He passed away earlier this year. But he was brilliant. That being said, he suffered from what I refer to as expertitis, which is the inflammation of the expert. He was absolutely sure that his methods should be working for the recovery of this species, and they weren't. And so he was going through assistants. It was him, and then he'd have one grad student working with him. And when it was not recovering, then he'd try a different grad student because he was really quite convinced that the grad student was not using his methodology. And then he brought me in. I had TA'd for him and he invited me in. And in 2003, I joined. My PhD pivots to this project. And I worked under him for 3 seasons. And I kept saying, this isn't working. Like, we've got to change the methods. And he did not want to change the methods. And that was very problematic. And I was getting ready to actually step away when the Urban Wildlands Group and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the U.S. Navy said, what if we let you use 18 females and change up the methods? And at the same time, they also hired another scientist to try some different methods as well, because they were hearing that it needed to shift. They just didn't know who would have the methodology that would work. And I used my observations with those 18 females, and I excluded ants, and I hand-fed the females, and I increased circulation, and I guaranteed exposure to natural sunlight. And that season, instead of 200, we had 720. And that to me was such a wealth. I was like, oh my gosh, they are everywhere. How am I going to take care of these 720 pupa when they eclose in the spring? Because it was everything I could do to do these very hands-on, very intensive methods with 18 females. And now I'm looking at roughly 360 females. So I was a single mom. I had 2 small kids, and we went to the teaching zoo. And it was the first time. I had no idea that Moorpark College had a teaching zoo, and I went out there with my 2 little kids, And we walked down the front road, and I got just partially down the front road. So here's the front road. You come in here, and I'm walking down the front road with my two little kids. And actually, I think I got to right where we are now. And I thought, this is it. This is the solution. I can teach here, and then I can walk across campus and I can rear butterflies. And that was so exciting to me. And I
Can I
thought,
say something really quick,
Yeah.
Vivian? I heard about you because I was doing an event at the zoo a few weekends ago, and that's exactly the spot where I was reading about the work that they were doing, and I was like, I'm gonna follow up on this. So it's a cool connection.
yeah. So it was right in that spot. And I believe they actually had two students out with a red-tailed hawk. And I said, do you guys breed any endangered species here? And they said, no, we don't breed anything here. And I was like, you will soon. It's like the evil wheels started turning in my mind. But I thought that before I approached them, I really needed to be associated with Moorpark College. So I immediately applied, and I was hired that summer to start teaching as an adjunct. And the moment that they hired me to teach a class in the summer as an adjunct, I went back to the zoo, walked in, and at the time that was Michaelin Hines, who was head of the zoo. And I said, hi, I'm a professor from over in biology. Did not mention that I hadn't taught a day yet. I'd just been hired. And I said, I do captive rearing of endangered butterflies on the side. And I'm wondering if you'd be interested. And I was so blessed because her background was condors. And she just started gushing about her work with the captive breeding of the condors and how much she missed it. And she said, let's go find you a place. And she walked out with me, and we checked out over here, which is where the tortoises are now. And there wasn't really good lighting there. And then we started walking down this way. And as soon as we got to that same spot, I was like, this is it. This is where I want to be. And she said, it's yours. And that's where the partnership started with Moorpark College's teaching zoo. Now, in 2008, it was my first season at the zoo, and we had 18 students work on it, and we produced 4,513. And the students were mad because we didn't hit 5,000. The students have such huge hearts, and they work so hard. And some of them are zoo students, and some of them are biology students, and some of them are environmental science students. And I've had students that aren't even in any of the sciences that are just interested in helping to recover our ecosystems, our species, our habitat. So that was absolutely fabulous. And then I had my new panic attack, which was, holy crap, we have 4,513. What do we do with those? So we did actually end up being able to release to the wild. But in the meantime, I want to talk about a couple of the other things that we do at the zoo where the rearing has been so successful through time. I use a ton of students. I am in a verbal MOU with the teaching zoo and also Moorpark College, along with all the other entities that work on it. I have found that it works best to go independent studies first. I used to do internships first, and I used to do volunteerships first, and that was not as effective as doing independent studies first because it's in the name, independent studies. It's looking for you to be able to work independently and prove yourself as a professional. And with independent studies, they're not expecting to be paid in that very first moment. And I totally believe in paying students. And all my time working on butterflies at the zoo is volunteer. I don't get paid for that. I use that labor money to pay the students who are working on it, as long as they've made it past that first semester when they do the independent studies. Firm believer in paying it forward. My income is coming from teaching. So I do the independent studies. That allows me to give them quizzes, to assign them materials to read, to really train them up. I use a med school mentality, which is see one, do one, teach one. So they have materials they can read online and a video they can watch online and a quiz that they can take online. And then they go on site and we show them what we're doing. And then they have to do what we're doing. And then they have to teach someone else. And that's when they really figure out what they know and what they don't know. It is absolutely amazing. I'm so proud of the students and everything that they do. Now, once they get through the independent studies program, then they can either do internship or a volunteership, just so that we make sure that they are covered in terms of insurance. I do have leads. The leads are paid to be on site and to train the next generation. And the fall in particular, I'm not around because that's not my flight. And so they are training up on how do you behave on zoo grounds? How do you keep yourself busy? What do we need to prep? Because we prep all of our own rearing materials. Currently, we have a $5,000 grant from ZAA, and we're building all new rearing boxes. So that is filling our time this fall and cycling out all of our old rearing boxes for new rearing boxes with this wonderful grant that we received. There are leadership opportunities. I absolutely want them to lead. They do have to shadow 2 other leads before they can become an alternate lead, which is like a substitute teacher. And they're not assigned a shift. They come in and they plug in if somebody is sick or somebody wants to go on vacation or has an event to celebrate. And then they pick up that pay because they're working that shift. And I encourage them to work with several different leads because I want them to bring themselves to it. I believe not only in diversity of our species out there in the environment, but diversity in the recovery effort. We all need to bring our gifts. They do develop their professional skills. They learn a whole bunch about endangered species, and it translates to other endangered species. I have somebody who's interested in going into primatology working with me right now, very into all of the rules, the regs, the reports, the data, that whole side. We do research. If they help with the paper, they go into the authorship list. I don't know why people restrict authorship lists. Firm believer that if you put in effort on it, your name should be on it. And usually it's their first publication. And I've had high school students that are then on a publication, and that grows their resume as well. I also give out awards if they put in 100 hours on site. They will get an award at the end, and I try to use a personalized picture of them so that they have that to hang on their wall and also to grow their resume. We do outreach. We do outreach at the zoo events. This is one of our craft tables. We do free crafts. We do education. Here's Zen with our life cycles of 2 different butterflies we've worked with. One of my favorites was a retired ballerina, prima ballerina, who had decided she wanted to be a vet. So she was going back to school after her career as a ballerina. And she did a Mommy and Me for free. And it was based off the Very Hungry Caterpillar. They loved it. And you know what? We've got them from cradle to grave. They're going to be looking out for those caterpillars. They're going to be looking out for those plants. They're going to be looking out for those butterflies. And I absolutely adore the creativity that they come up with as they're doing that. So how do I run it at Moorpark College? I call it a grad lab at a community college because it's completely a grad lab. It is a think tank. Everybody's opinions are welcome, even if you're brand new. What I don't want to do is become guilty of expertitis. I have put in 20 years of my life on this, but I absolutely am not the end all be all of anything. It's very important to listen to everyone, and I encourage them to ask. If we're doing something and you don't know why we're doing it that way, ask. If we can explain it to you, then hopefully we're sticking with that. But if you have a better idea, I am all for better ideas. As we increased our overages, that also meant that we could cooperate with research. One of the research experiments that we did, it was one of the harder ones that I've had to do because we actually did have permission from Fish and Wildlife to sacrifice some individuals. This is called bluing, when they have formed into the butterfly and they're getting ready to eclose. And we sacrificed a few of these, both male. This is male. You can see nice black line, blue extending up to a white shoulder. This is a female. You can see the black line is there, but then you have kind of a smoky eye effect in terms of gray and blue mixed together. And we sent them off to USDA, and we found out that they are using pheromones to synchronize their eclosion. That was a very important question to have answered because pheromones are hormones that they're using to talk to each other as they're starting to come out for sexual reproduction. That changed how we housed them. We have them in groups so they can use their pheromones to influence each other so that they can synchronize, come out, have sex. That was a huge question. Now, as we were looking at that, we're like, huh, well, if they're using pheromones, then it must be that they are doing communal pupation. And anecdotally, I had noticed that they tend to pupate together. This is the bottom of one of our pots from one of our rearing containers. They have to practice with other pots because once you grab a pot and you lift it up, you cannot set it down until you clear those larvae off the bottom. So, and this is all our data, just so that you can see that they're having to collect a lot of data. So then we were like, well, we need to prove that they're actually doing communal pupation, because one of the major questions in the wild is, where are they pupating? How are they pupating? They did one study trying to find the pupa in the wild. They only found 1.5 pupa. So that question has not been answered. This past spring, we had enough students working on it that we could measure from each pupa to its nearest neighbor. And you can see that it was significant that most of them were within 5 centimeters of their closest neighbor. In fact, they're mostly touching their closest neighbor. Next up is 5 to 10. Very rarely were they more than that away. And there were plenty of places that they could have pupated, but they wanted to cluster together. So they like the rims of pots, and they would be together in the rim, and then there'd be a significant portion of the rim of the pot with nobody in it. So it's not just rim, it's rim with a friend. Yes? Netflix and chill, caterpillar style. So then we were asking, okay, not only should we measure how far is it, where are they? Because they kept saying, my predecessors, that they were in the soil, but I've never seen them in the soil. 20 years, they just aren't in the soil. And so we decided to write down for all 5,400 that we had this year, where did they pupate? And I will tell you, they are not in the soil. Here's soil. They are not in the soil. Now, where they did pupate, and the A's and the B's are the locations that are significant to 0.0001. And that was the bottom of the pots. It was in the clippings, which are cut food plant that was left in there. The rim of the pot, the sleeve block. These are all up and away from the soil, but they're dry, and they tend to be small and cramped places where they all like to cram in. So we're about to publish this, and no more will people say they're in the soil, because they're not in the soil. One major problem with this study is it is in captivity, and they don't have the rim of a pot or the bottom of a pot. So where are they doing it in the wild? That's something else we're going to be looking at this year. We're going to put out field cages. We're going to do it on the base because the base has a fence line, so people won't mess with it. And we're going to release into that cage. And after they've oviposited, we're going to pull that cage and let them do whatever they will. But that should concentrate our eggs and larvae in a single spot. And then we're going to put out various things that they could pupate under and see what do they choose in the wild. I will tell you where you're not going to find them is in the soil. So as they eclose and they come out, they have sexual dimorphism, and the students have to learn to use the sexual dimorphism in order to sex them. So these are students that are bringing out our group seeding, and they're checking for any butterflies up here that need to be processed. They process them by transferring them from the E-cups into little processing containers, and then they have to make them walk because they're looking at these front legs. In the males, the front legs are fused and shorter, and they tap and they have no traction. And females, they have 6 beautiful, perfect walking legs. So they're looking for that. I make them look for that first, and then they can go outside and use the sun to make them bask. And as they bask, you can totally verify, separate from the feet, that this is a male. You see the blue goes all the way to the edge with the black line, and this is a female where you have that nice dusky eye. You fade to a gray before you hit the black. And then we mate them. So this is Morgan, and she would have been putting, oh, look, that's a mating pair right there. So there's a mating pair inside of one of our mating boxes. And this is identifying which girls and which boys go in there. It is group mating. They do not do well one-on-one, So it's kind of like 7 brides for 7 brothers. You put in a gene line of girls and a gene line of boys, and I have their pedigrees going back to when I took over the project in 2007. And we can make sure that we do not have anybody closer than second cousins that are having sex with each other so that we can manage the genetics. We do experiment with different things through time as approved by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and now California Fish and Wildlife Department. 2 years ago, we used Gatorade instead of water to make our artificial honey. And look at the fecundity. That was insane. That was crazy. So this is what we had been using, which was just water with honey. This is Gatorade with honey. I will never use anything other than Gatorade with honey. Now, I got into a discussion with a nutritionist about what aspect of Gatorade is it. I don't know. I don't know if it's the electrolytes. I don't know if it has a really strong scent to it, so they tend to feed more. I have not broken it down to that level, but I do know that Gatorade makes our production go sky high. So we're using Gatorade now. Gatorade to save the species. Then this past year, we looked at, well, shouldn't we discuss what the larvae are eating, since we know they'll eat 2 different things. They'll eat deerweed and rattlepod. Okay, so here is deerweed fecundity, how many we produce. Here's rattlepod fecundity. I'm not using rattlepod anymore. I'm only using deerweed. My focus is the recovery of the species. And so I need to be using deerweed. Then weight of the pupa. Here's deerweed, here's rattlepod. And you can see that this is significant data. The weight matters because weight when you go into the chrysalis is associated with longevity and fecundity as an adult. You don't get to bulk up after you come out as an imago, as a butterfly. So once again, deerweed wins the day. They are big, fat, happy caterpillars when they go into that chrysalis and go into diapause. So absolutely doing deerweed. Drift. We don't really know so much about drift. So what we're doing is actually evacuating. So we have a shed, and this is us when we're rearing. And then the college is so kind. The college, when we're in season, M&O has set Friday mornings as the day that they spray the college with fungicide, herbicide, pesticide, whatever it is, aside that they want to use. They do that on Friday mornings. So Thursday afternoon, we bundle everything into our shed. We lock it down, we seal the seams, and then we don't open it up until an hour after they're done spraying the campus, because there are tons of papers that talk about the drift of asides, and we don't want that to impact our stock. We could do LD50. I'm not excited about LD50 if you're not familiar with it. It's lethal dose 50, and you're trying to see what is the dosage to kill 50%. Not excited about doing that on these. Perhaps we can do it on a surrogate species, but definitely drift is impacting us. So I think actually it's the same folks who are here. I just started touching base through SEEDS, which is the student chapter of Ecological Society of America, with Santa Monica Mountains, and I'm totally following their STEAM machine. That's you guys, isn't it? That are here present? Aren't you guys doing the STEAM? Am I wrong? Do you know?
My
So there-
coworker here used to work over there, and she said that you are correct.
Yeah, I am following that. Oh, so tasty. I really want to find a way that they can control what they need to control for the college without spraying stuff. The drift is just huge. And it would be really nice to not have to evacuate every Friday morning. So what is our success? We've produced over 55,000 Palos Verdes Blue now, and we have released over 25,000 to the wild. We've gone from one site when it was rediscovered, And now we have 12 sites within its historic range, and we are adding on, I believe, 3 more sites. So by May, it will be at 15 different sites on the peninsula. Absolutely ecstatic with it. And then that has helped us with our relationship with CAA, who is our accrediting agency for the teaching zoo at Moorpark. And they then gave us the $5,000 to redo all our boxes because my boxes needed a facelift. Yes. So the students do go out and do the releases. So we take them out in these little containers. They're all labeled so we know exactly who we're releasing. And when we release them, they are very weak flyers, and they have a tendency to hang with you for a little while. So there are these wonderful moments that touch your heart and feed your soul and make it worthwhile to volunteer some more time. I found my poster for you. This is my poster that I adore. It's not my poster, but it's amazing. Part of our broader impact as we look at the working with the Palos Verdes Blue at the teaching zoo is to reduce fear of insects and to try to reframe insects so that people will care, because if people don't care, they're not going to make a change. So this one is absolutely huge. Oh, I would love to have you. Absolutely. Do you have my email? Touch base with me if you're interested in coming on a release. Releases are March through May because it's a spring flight for us. And we keep it to groups of 18 or less. But you do have to come to the Palos Verdes Peninsula because we put it back exactly where we found it. We are using the Palos Verdes Blue as a hook. And then we also try to use other charismatic arthropods to open up people's minds to arthropods and invertebrates. So this is one of my students who is super gifted, who did a photo op of a mantis shrimp, and that's me being a crab. So it's one of the favorite photo ops out there. So we like that. Starting in 2020 is when I started working with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Prior to that, they were not overseeing the invertebrates, and I think we were grandfathered for a while. But starting in 2020, we started working with Kyle at California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they've been a great partner as well. So it's all good, all hands on board as far as I'm concerned. So why does local insect conservation matter? I know I'm preaching to the choir, and that is nice. But we do need to tell the story of why insects matter. So there's a whole bunch of critters that like to eat insects. And I have had people go, oh, but when you release the butterflies, isn't something going to eat them? And I say, yeah, something is going to eat them. But the goal is to get them stable enough that it's okay that they're interacting with predators, because that's part of nature too. And if people don't like insects, they may like birds, right? And so as soon as you start pointing out that there are a heck of a lot of birds that love to eat insects, then you can get them on board with insect conservation. The other thing is to take a look at all the things that are hitting insects currently. I'm not going to go through the list, but this was a great visual. And I have my links in my slides if you want links to any of the visuals that I took from other reports. But definitely our insects are dying a death by 1,000 cuts. And is it really that bad? Yes, it is. So as you're looking at this, for example, let's go down to butterflies and moths. And these are all the ones that are in trouble. That's a lot. Now, it's not as bad as flies, actually. And it's pretty hard to make people worry about flies, although it's an insect apocalypse across the board. So yes, we need to raise awareness about leps, butterflies and skippers and moths, but I think we need an overall raising of awareness for what's going on with the insect apocalypse. And there is interest. And they are putting out hints onto how to help even in your own backyard. So we need to emphasize that and amplify that. They are also super yummy. I refer to them as crunchy peanut M&Ms because that exoskeleton is a polysaccharide, so they're super sweet. And on the inside, there are lots of protein. So yeah, there are a lot of vertebrates that enjoy consuming our insects. If that's why you join in the fight, I am all in. That's fine. Trillions of bugs flitting from flower to flower for pollination has been estimated to give us $500 billion of service per year. This is based off of a study in China where they did not have pollinators, so they were having to hand pollinate and pay people to hand pollinate. And that's the estimation if that happens across the board. In the US, there was a study that looked at dung beetles, and they save ranchers an estimated $380 million a year. I have no problem putting out there the money that is saved by saving the insects. If we need to look at the pocketbook, let's look at the pocketbook and let's look at the benefits. Now, some of them are a hard sell, such as flies. With flies, I always go to chocolate because that's what the pollinator is so that we can have chocolate. If you want to wipe out all the flies, then say goodbye to your chocolate. You're not going to have chocolate anymore. So I think we do need to really lean into the edutainment and making sure everybody knows about the insect apocalypse, but also to make it as interesting and not the apocalypse, but insects as fun as possible. Now, what we're doing is working with the bug. This was LA Fleet Week. It was really cool. This is the Rear Admiral. And he actually got a male to pose on his finger. He looks like a little boy. You will not know. He released dozens because he just wanted a little boy to pose on his finger. And he actually got it. And at that point, he let everybody else start releasing bugs. So that's fine. There are other folks that are totally doing work on this, just like you guys. I'm going to highlight a few from ZAA just because I just did a talk there and I'm on their conservation committee out there. So there's Joel Sartori, who's a very famous National Geographic photographer, and he is absolutely trying to bring more of a beautiful spotlight to insects, including flies. And his photography is amazing. The Columbus Zoo is working on the burying beetle. The Fossil Rim Wildlife Center actually is working with horned lizards, but frequently as you work with vertebrates, you find out that you're going to have to work with invertebrates. So they've ended up spending a lot of their time working on ants. And then you have Katokin Wildlife Preserve. And they are using a grant, which is $1,200 a year, to provide habitat for checker spots. And I think it's really important that we talk up opportunities like that so that if what we're doing is having entities that are planting areas so that there are little pit stops here and there, little fragments, I'm totally on board for fragments. I'll take whatever we can get. Colorado State has an MOU for their grad students to work with their butterfly pavilion. That is fabulous. I think that we do need to tap in, and I heard earlier about Santa Barbara Zoo talking about grad students. That's so fabulous. I'm going to encourage all of you guys to remember that community college students are amazing and they work really hard. And I think it's an untapped resource in general. And they're looking for the opportunity to volunteer and get experience and get boots on the ground. So totally happy to talk about the different ways that you can set that up to have success with undergrads, but undergrads at 4 years, but also undergrads at 2 years are absolutely awesome. At the ZAA conservation panel, we talked about empowering staff. And that felt very much like home to me because when I have students working with me, I don't want to tell them what they're going to do. They always have to pick a project and I want them to choose that project. And they get to have a little bit of time to think about it and see what we do. But you really need them to buy in. And if they do buy in, it's amazing what it does for the project, and it's also amazing what it does for them as they move forward in their career. So huge on that. There are also options for existing programs and cooperative conservation. I do want to stress the military because I think a whole bunch of people forget about the military, and they are great partners and they own a lot of land. So huge props to my military partners. This is also a friend of mine, and he wrote this book about butterfly conservation in North America. Highly recommend it. It does have lots of great advice in it. He is also always open to giving advice, and you can reach out to him and talk to him. He's in Florida. And it talks about, you know, choices that you make based off of the resources that you have. I didn't include all the decision trees. Happy to share more decision trees. He already approved it. It's all cool. But the decision trees help you to look at what can we do? Can we contribute to something that's going on? Are we going to, you know, invest in that restoration? Are we going to lean into education? Or can we do some of the research that needs to be done so that we know if we are, like me, evacuating with every spray? Do we really have to do that? That is a lot of work, and it is stress on the species as it goes indoor for that period of time. But I'm not willing to take the chance and leave them out when I know there's going to be drift coming up the hill. So research would help us figure out whether or not that's a waste of time, or is that something we really need to focus on, and we need to switch over to using like the steamer to kill the weeds instead of, you know, herbicide. Captive breeding is expensive, no doubt about it, and we piecemeal it together with Section 6 and money from the military and the MOU with the college. The college gives us space, electricity, and water in exchange for students being able to work hands-on with the endangered species and get things like publications and networking. So it's definitely piecemeal together. You know who's even better at finding funding is this guy. He's even done stuff with microbreweries. So he is very creative, and I encourage everybody to be creative. And if somebody goes, hey, do you think we could partner with the microbrewery? Like, don't just blow it out of the water, because maybe that's your next source of money. I know we totally need to talk to Gatorade. I haven't reached out to Gatorade. I need a dose of my own medicine and reach out to Gatorade. I do want to make my acknowledgments. It's a long list. I've got to put U.S. Navy at the top. It was their land where the last population was found, and they are involved to this day, and they always go way over what they have to do. DLA used to be involved until those fuel tanks underneath the hills were decommissioned. So they're now fuel tanks of cement underneath the hills instead of fuel. So DLA has stepped off, but appreciated their support in the beginning there. Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Urban Wildlands, who is my direct oversight for captive rearing. UCLA is a huge help. They're helping us with different questions, but that's also how I got into it, was because my predecessor was at UCLA, and that's where I performed my PhD. Moorpark College, oh my gosh, they step to the plate every single time. And I cannot tell you how great it is for M&O guys to help us out with the spray events and also with fixing our mini split when it fails and all the various ways they do that. The teaching zoo and all of their students and staff and faculty, ZAA with their grants and their acknowledgement and their encouragement. Oh, that's funny. I bet they do. Oh, I don't know. Are they on Powerade? No, they're on, you're right. They're on Gatorade. They're on Gatorade. PVPLC for doing the restoration, and frequently we do workshops and inspirational talks together. Osborne Biological Consulting is a great guy named Ken Osborne, and he does all our field work for us. City of LA owns some of the land we're releasing on. LA County owns some of the land we're releasing on. Rancho Palos Verdes, who, yes, they wiped it out, but the people involved now are wholly different people. So I always need to come back after I said Rancho Palos Verdes wiped it out and emphasize that those people are gone and that they are very much focused on bringing it back. And they've been a great partner. Rolling Hills Estate, USDA for helping us find those pheromones so that we adjusted how we were rearing them, and it helped us to synchronize our pop and have better success with breeding. and University of Florida, including, of course, Jarrett Daniels, who wrote the book and has been a huge inspiration. Questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like I told my coworkers here, I bet you're a really good teacher because in one presentation you made me like really care about this butterfly.
Aw.
In the interest of time, we'll just take a couple questions. So you can raise your hand to be called on if you do have a question.
And you can also send me questions. I just put my email in the chat room again.
Oh, Hillary, you have a question?
I always have questions. I'm curious, like, how you see this continuing into the future, you know, like how well are the butterflies establishing? How are you like winding down the releases, and kind of will you measure like sustained population?
Yeah. So it's our goal to have 12 self-sustaining populations. Currently, I would say we don't have any self-sustaining populations. They're all dependent on us to release, including the last wild population that was on the base. It's been pretty difficult because it's a disturbance species, and so we've had to find new ways to create fire when there's no fire. And for a while they were using a lot of chemical intervention, and I think that was very detrimental. Currently there's a lot of physical intervention. They also are using goats now, high intensity, low frequency goats, which has been very effective. Very excited about the goats, huge fan of the goats. But in terms of the population sticking, there's discussion over why that is not happening, why they are not becoming self-sustaining. We do see that they are breeding. We do see that they are hatching. We do see that we have larvae there. There's a question as to whether it's just habitat, because we are absolutely overrun with mustard. And it progresses very quickly past that first initial disturbance phase that we need. So the fact that the base shut down actually was bad because there's fewer vehicles disturbing and keeping us at an early successional stage. But it could also be their pupation site. So I brought that up, that we really have to figure out where they're pupating, because I think that they're pupating in snags and logs, and those would be cleared because of fire. And so I think they don't have appropriate places to pupate. And for us, they can stay in that pupa casing for up to 5 years before they actually come out as an adult. So we really need to make sure that they have an appropriate place to pupate. It could also be concentration of predators. I mean, it could be artificial watering that's impacting them. Lots of different things. So we just got our 5-year contract. So we've got a contract through 2030. Come 2030, everybody's acknowledging if we can get it to stick, I'm happy to work myself out of a job. That would be fabulous. But we haven't quite identified what's going on with why they aren't becoming self-sustaining populations.
Thank you. Georgia, did you have a question?
Yes, just a couple things here. Is it possible to get some of the pictures and the slides, the posters?
Yes, email me.
Yes, thank you. Okay, in terms of Moorpark, have you tried to liaison with Poison Free Malibu, who's done a lot of work in many cities and succeeded in persuading people that they don't need to use?
I'm gonna write that down. It's Poison Free Malibu, is that what it's called?
And that would be Kian and Joel Schulman, but they'll get it at that email. So it's Poison Free, just very quickly give you the correct address here. Sorry. Oops. Gosh.
That would be great. And M&O has heard us, and they're starting to plant more native plants instead of the palette, which was complete exotics before. And I do appreciate that they spray less than they used to, and that during flight they organize it and notify me. But anything we can do to lower the spraying is going to be key. That's maybe Another issue on the peninsula is I don't know how much spraying is happening in the surrounding of the fragments that we're using.
Great. It's, and I can send this to you, poisonfreemalibu@gmail.com. And I
Awesome.
will say they were instrumental. The reason Malibu is poison-free now, and the reason that the state has mandated no rodenticides. That was a recent bill that was just passed. So they've been very successful and have done a lot of work locally as well as some nationally and throughout the state.
Awesome. Thank you very
yeah.
much. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Really quickly, Julie, do you want to do your next question? And then other follow-up questions we can put in the chat.
Could I just say one very, very fast thing? And that is that, to my knowledge, snags and logs don't increase fire risk. So I don't think there's a reason to remove them. And the person with much more authority than I is Bryant Baker at the Los Padres Forest Watch.
Thank you. Julie, you want to ask your question?
Jana, thank you so much. I loved your presentation. I learned so much, and I so appreciate your work.
Oh, thanks.
And teaching a new generation of entomologists and conservationists. So thank you. I have one question. Will you be looking at, or is somebody in your group, carrying capacity for these populations that are released back into their native habitat?
I will be so overjoyed when that's a question that we have to worry about. It's there. So we were excited that we are seeing flight on the fragments we're using prior to us releasing, which means that they are kind of sticking, but the flight isn't big enough for us to stop releasing there yet. Yes, we definitely need to look at carrying capacity for the various fragments. We're also trying to make sure that we're establishing corridors because they're very weak flyers. And so if they don't have a corridor, we're not going to have any gene flow. So, and Palos Verdes Peninsula Land Conservancy is doing a lot of that corridor work to try to interconnect them. And then that will help a bit with the carrying capacity if we can have, immigration and emigration in a metapopulation type structure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. That was a great presentation. The comments coming in are all in agreement. You did a really great job. Looking forward to coming across your path again in the future, maybe for one of those releases. We were really excited about that. Next, we are going to move on to Nadia Seal-Faith from the Santa Barbara Zoo. And Nadia, just so you know, I already told my coworker, like our VCRCD updates, we can just save those for a future meeting. So don't feel like you're pressed for time. You're good to go.
Okay, thanks. I just have kind of a quick update anyway. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Although, Jana, I will say it was kind of funny because I actually did an internship with UCLA Athletics, and so Gatorade was my life for a couple of years. So yeah, they definitely use Gatorade.
Awesome. My son was an athlete at Pepperdine, and they were Powerade. So
nice.
I get confused sometimes, but that's good to hear. I'll have to ask.
Yeah.
See if we can get to
All right. So I am just going to kind of talk about the conservation work that we do at the Santa Barbara Zoo, very specifically with our Western monarch. Yeah, so we're going from blue to orange, and let's go. So just to give a little bit of context as to who we are at the Santa Barbara Zoo, our mission is preservation, conservation, and enhancement of the natural world and its living treasures through education, research, and recreation. In our hedgehog, conservation is right there in the title, and conservation is very important for who we are as an institution, both culturally and as an actual accredited institution itself. You heard Jana mention ZAA, which is one association that zoos and aquariums can be a part of. We are a part of AZA, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and that is our accrediting body. And a part of being accredited by the AZA is to maintain a certain level of conservation. And so, as a zoo, we're really considered a medium-sized zoo. So we're about 30 acres, and we've been open, just over since 1963. We actually had a really kind of interesting history of how we became the Santa Barbara Zoo. Ultimately, we went from a child's estate, which was a Julia child, and our land was actually donated so that it could be for the children. No real affiliation with the last name, it just kind of happened to work that way. But we are a nonprofit. We don't get funding from the city or the state. We have about 400 seasonal, part-time, and full-time staff. The 400 really is seasonal and part-time. Full-time staff is probably around 150 or so, kind of regularly throughout the year. We have just over 105 species on our grounds. A lot of that are really going to be our fish and invertebrates, and we engage more than 500 volunteers. So all of those numbers really amount to us as being, again, a medium-sized zoo, not small, but we're not LA or San Diego by any means. But I think that we're kind of that perfect Goldilocks thing, but that might just be my bias. Very likely you guys already know this, but again, kind of giving you a context of how we have developed our conservation programs here at the Santa Barbara Zoo. There are biodiversity hotspots that have been recognized throughout the world. And the definition is essentially that you have a vast number of species that are found nowhere else. As you can see, the California Floristic Province is one of these 35 biodiversity hotspots, and the Santa Barbara Zoo is smack dab right in the middle of that. Not only are we a biodiversity hotspot, regionally, we are identified as a biosphere region. And very specifically, we are a part of the Channel Islands biosphere region. So not only do we have these high level of endemics, in the California, but that are recognized within our area, we also work in a way with industry and with our community that maintains those endemics in a sustainable way. And that is really what that definition of biosphere region means. So the UNESCO Biosphere Man Program has identified our area as one of these regions. And it's really great because that means essentially we have a lot going on right in our own backyard that we have the opportunity to be able to be involved in and really contribute to. You see a lot of zoo programs that end up going to Africa, that end up going to Asia, that end up going to, South America. And while those are amazing programs, saving the polar bear in the Arctic, for our size, for our resources, for the amazing things that we have right here in our backyard, we have constructed our conservation programs in such a way as to be able to kind of get the most bang for our buck. And so because there's so many opportunities right here, we can really engage more staff. We can really engage our whole campus, our whole organization in leveraging what we have to offer into these awesome programs that are right here, again, in our own backyard. So that's kind of the background of how we have developed our conservation programs. We're involved in a lot of different conservation programs, several that you guys are probably familiar with: California condors, island foxes. We have snowy plover rehabilitation. We've done a lot with local amphibians. We've helped out with some sea otter counts. But one of the ones that we are also very happy to have been a part of is the Western monarch overwintering. So again, this is probably not news to some of you, but I did go back through this report that the Xerces Society had put out in 2016 to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And, again, when we're trying to figure out, which programs that we want to be a part of, we want to make sure that, one, we don't overcommit, because again, there are a lot of really, really amazing programs and a lot of really amazing ways that we can be a part of these programs. And so we want to figure out the best way that we can leverage our resources in a way that's going to be effective for the conservation programs that are right here. And so, as many of you know, the Western monarch overwinters in a different way than the Eastern monarchs do. And they overwinter in vastly different numbers than the Eastern monarch does. And so it's interesting being a North American organization talking about the North American monarch and really trying to raise your hand and say, no, overwintering, we have all these challenges that we have to deal with because we're an overwintering, population. Whereas on the eastern side, they're the breeding population. And really, when it comes to overwintering, it's in Mexico. And then even that overwintering in Mexico is concentrated into, I say one space, it's a very large space, but our overwintering sites are lined up and down the coast of California. And in the eastern side, they count by hectares and we count by individuals. And so, even though they're considered one species and a lot of the approaches are going to be similar, there are, some very significant differences. And there are significant differences in the way that you even approach the conservation of the species. And so where we really found our niche and the way that we could be the most effective was to focus in on overwintering and the overwintering counts that the Xerxes Society has put on. Now, they started the overwintering counts. It was actually a volunteer that came in and said, hey, we need to standardize these counts. There were some biologists that had started to do this. And one of the biologists that was doing the counts, I think this was back in the 80s, said, hey, you know what? I think that we should standardize this. I happen to be a volunteer for the Xerxes Society. Let's see if they may want to take this on. And so in 1993, the Xerxes Society formalized the overwintering count. And, part of the reason that we got involved is that if you look at this map of priority locations that the Xerxes Society created and sent to Fish and Wildlife Service, our location is smack dab right in the middle of a lot of the priority sites. Now, I know a lot of the graphs that you end up seeing talk about the population as a whole, but one of the things I was interested in was the fact that if you do look at the total number of overwintering sites in California, Santa Barbara is number one in just the total number of sites. And, you can also see that they're also number one in the number of active sites. And because this is a very, listy way of tabley thing to look at, I kind of jumped or pushed all those numbers into something that's a little bit more visually, accessible to me. So hopefully it's a little bit more visually accessible to you. But again, you look at the number of sites and even the number of active sites, Santa Barbara just has far and above the highest number of sites. And so when it comes to, the need and the call for action to get, bodies out there to just try to cover all these sites, the Xerxes Society really needed help with that. And so we raised our hands, said, this sounds like a really worthwhile endeavor. How can we help? Let's be those boots on the ground. Let's be those eyes. Let's go out there and count. And so this is really where we came in. And when you look at even just the top priority sites, so not even just the sheer number of sites, but when they actually listed out their top priority sites, the sites that we adopted are in there. 11 of the 25 top priority sites are found in both Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. I will say that I live in Ventura County, and so very easy. And a lot of our staff live in Ventura County as well. And so it's a lot easier. It's easy for us to be able to maintain both of those counties. But if you do look, a quarter of the sites that are in that top priority are ones that we have adopted and regularly count. So since 2012, as I kind of mentioned in my intro, we've embraced this fantastic program, and we've been regularly monitoring these sites. Part of this effort too is because of our connection with these with this community conservation program, we have been asked to help to restore overwintering sites that have been identified. One, because of our proximity, two, because of our familiarity with the sites, but three, as a part of our conservation culture at the zoo, we actually offer the opportunity for every single one of our staff members to have a benefit of participating in conservation and community conservation. So we actually pay our staff to go out and participate in conservation, and our executive team and our senior management team give full support for anybody that wants to participate. And even if we can't really quite make it work on the leave benefit, we'll still be able to support staff time. We really try to get people out. And so we get people out that have been able to help with habitat restoration. We regularly get tons of people out to help with the monarch counts, and they love it. It's an accessible conservation program. A lot of people know and love and remember the monarchs from when they were growing up, and they just love that connection that they can have to conservation. When some of our other programs, going out to the islands, going out to condors might be a little bit more inaccessible for them, usually the monarchs are going to be accessible to everybody. And so what have we contributed over the years? So since 2012, we started with the Thanksgiving count, which they're now calling the mid count. In 2016, when the Xerxes Society and Fish and Wildlife Service started adding the lake count or the New Year's count, we said, all right, yeah, let's recount our sites. Sure, let's go for it. And so since 2012 through this year, we have done a total of 150 counts. This year we have added on the early count or the Halloween count. And so you can actually add 7 more sites to that. So we're at 157. And starting on Saturday, we're going to be going and already have a plan to count 9 to 10 more sites for the Thanksgiving count. So we're going to continue on. It's been a really successful program for us. As you can see, the level of engagement that we've been able to get 75 individuals. Now, many of these actually come out on repeat counts. So these are just individuals that have come out, 75 staff, board members, and volunteers. We have 13 departments at the zoo. 10 of our departments have participated in this, which is huge when you're talking about, we've engaged our facilities staff, we've engaged our membership staff, we've engaged, our guest services staff, not just typically conservation and animal care. We've really been able to broaden our reach within, our zoo community, and then even beyond that. We've been able to count just over 71,000 monarchs. Obviously, we counted a lot more earlier on. It's kind of funny if you look at the numbers from 2012 to 2016, it's probably as many as we counted from then on, even though we've increased the number of sites. That's just more of a state of the monarchs than anything, but that's tale for another day. We've counted 25 unique sites. The nice thing again about having that close relationship with Fish and Wildlife and the Xerxes Society, sometimes they'll just ask us, hey, can you just count this site? It hasn't been counted in a long time. No one's been able to get out to it. Do you think you can just see what's going on? And so they know that they can trust our data, trust our methods of tracking, and we can really help to say, yeah, no, there's monarchs here, or no, you should probably just X this one off the list. This is not an active site anymore. And so that's really, that's really encouraging for us that we are doing something beneficial for this program. We've spent 77 days counting, and we've counted over 2 counties. Now, because we've been so involved in the Western monarch counts, we have connected with a lot of individuals that do monarch conservation. Now, several years ago, we have participated in monarch tagging. We have done tagging events. However, since the listing status of the monarch was updated by Fish and Wildlife Service, they're going to be proposed, very likely going to be proposed on December 4th of this year, especially if you see how the trends are going. Unfortunately, that will probably really push forward certain things. But since that ESA warranted but precluded listing came out, California Fish and Wildlife Service required that individuals handling monarchs need to be permitted. And, I think that was a good step to take in the protection of the species, but it did make an additional hurdle to be able to participate in tagging studies and tagging programs. It just created that extra barrier. But again, it's for the protection of the species. You can't really begrudge it. And I'm not saying that just because somebody from CDFW is on here or it's being recorded. Truly believe that. However, we were, approached by Dr. Gail Morris from the Southwest study, who has done actually something fantastic with CDFW, and they have worked for over a year to create the first permitting process for a community science project, which is huge when you think about, CDFW recognized the needs of this tagging process and to really be able to understand what's going on with monarchs. The Southwest Monarch Study has been going on for several years. They wanted to incorporate more data from California. And so, they were able to work with CDFW to create a permitting process to allow this to move forward. Now, the tagging that they do, they put out thousands of tags. As you can imagine, the reciting or the recapture data is really, it's pretty low. It's about 1%, but that really means that they just need to put out more tags to really get the amount of data that they need. And some of the things that they've already started to show have been, really good, really good information to drive management questions and to drive management actions forward. Monarchs that they've tagged in the Southwest, they have seen down in Mexico. So they, we do know that the genetics mix and the tagging data proved it. They also were able to show that not all the monarchs that migrate end up in overwintering sites. Sometimes they do just stick around in the deserts of Arizona and California. And so, it's understanding that habitat use throughout their migration cycle, understanding the length of the migration cycle. So it's actually a lot longer of a migration cycle than you see in the eastern population of when they actually leave. And maybe that's just because they have a shorter time to go. Maybe they're looking at different environmental cues. But again, the tagging study just helps to inform a little bit more, because really, in my experience talking to many different monarch researchers, we know a lot about the eastern monarch population, and in comparison, we know relatively little about the western population. And so, getting more of this information is just more helpful. And so this year, we were approached, we worked with Dr. Gail Morris in the Southwest Monarch Study. We were able to host one of 3 tagging trainings that resulted in, us and other people in our community being permitted as a part of this project. And through that training, 7 of our zoo staff became permitted to tag monarchs. One of our zoo staff, who happens to be on this call, is also a tier 2 level training. And he also monitors, larval stages. And so that's another part of this. There's also a tier 3 that they're working on, but 7 of our staff are tier 1, which means that we can go out and tag. Fortunately, even though the numbers are a little bit lower this year, our zoo staff has been going out regularly. They've been able to actually tag 3 monarchs. Now, one of the caveats is that we can't tag in overwintering sites, and we have to tag outside of the 1 mile outside of an active overwintering sites. And so we've really had to think about the migration path and where we might be able to find monarchs, because obviously, given our history, we know overwintering sites very well. We're limited to 100 individuals, but there was one overwintering site last year that I saw over 1,000. And so, we could easily get 100 individuals at one site, but when we have to be outside of an overwintering site, we have to figure this out. And this is our first year doing it. And so these 2 individuals had been going out weekly to both Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, lots of milkweed, lots of great habitat. I went out there to check it out. I saw a monarch. I'm like, yes, this is going to be the place to go. And then we worked with Santa Barbara City Parks, and I identified one of the parks that had been on the monarch milkweed mapper, that somebody had seen a monarch. Was like, oh, well, you can check that out too. And it happened to work out well because one of our taggers lived right next to the park. And so they had been going to both places. In my mind, they were going to get the Botanic Garden. haven't seen any at the Botanic Garden, but this one city park right in the middle of downtown Santa Barbara, they've seen 3, and they've been able to tag all 3. They happen to be males. This was the very first one that was tagged for the season and for this particular their project. And so we're learning a lot too about where we see them, where we're going to try to strategize our tagging, and we'll kind of see where this goes throughout the year. But this is the very beginning of our involvement in this project. There is funding to go for, as I understand it, it's 2.5 years, but how we've started, it'll be 3 seasons. So we'll kind of report in our data, check in with Gail, see how it goes. And then when the next year rolls around, we'll see if we can tag at overwintering sites, or if we can just strategize at places like this park in Santa Barbara. And finally, Trent kind of mentioned it when he had introduced ourselves, but the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, as I mentioned, really believes in zoos participating in conservation, and not just conservation at the site of the zoo, but really broadening our conservation impact by working directly with the people that are managing and putting on these conservation efforts, and really trying to be collaborative with moving conservation forward. And as a part of that, what they developed is this program, and this was in about I want to say mid 2010s, around 2014, 2015, this program called SAFE, or Saving Animals from Extinction. And essentially what it does is it creates this network of partners that are actually working with the species in situ, interested members from the AZA community, and then someone to help facilitate all of that group. And so you have kind of these 3 prongs, and a species can apply to be a safe species. And we're now up to almost 50 safe programs that are either by an individual species or by a group of species, as it makes sense to do so. I will give Trent a shout out. I believe that he was definitely a part of getting the North American Monarch Safe program up and off the ground, and he participates on the steering committee for that. And so what our zoo was able to do is leverage our marketing resources to create a marketing campaign that is still used by our AZA partners and by our community partners. And so this is just an example of the graphics that our marketing team was able to design as a part of the outreach and education, and how we were able to contribute that. Then obviously we also contribute with our field program of helping out the overwintering counts and other parts of the overwintering monarch conservation plans here in California. So that was really all I had. And so happy to take any questions if you want, but I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. As before, if you guys have a question, you can just raise your hand and I'll call on you. I guess I'm curious, Nadia, how successful are the staff, like when they see a monarch, like getting the tag on it? What's the success rate with just even that aspect?
Our staff have been able to catch all the monarchs that they've seen at this one city park. We've seen monarchs on our zoo, but then you have to have your backpack and your net with you. So we've been talking about, radioing and trying to grab a net, but our staff, and again, we just started this. We probably have been doing this for maybe a month, and we go out weekly for this. But I will say that the first time our 2 staff, they were like, we chased this butterfly around and we were so close to getting to it. And then after that, they're like, every monarch we've seen, we've gotten it, but
Okay.
we've only seen 3 so far. So
cool. I was seeing a couple comments come in the chat. Hillary saying that her kids can catch and tag monarchs too when she took them out to test the methods. They kind of have to wait for it to land, which makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, fortunately, they were able to capture, I think, 1 in midair. But yeah, they did wait for them to land. Fortunately, there was a eucalyptus tree, and so they got them.
Yeah. Any other questions?
There's a question real
Oh,
quick,
my
actually.
coworker has a question.
What's the reason you can't tag them at the overwintering sites?
So the reason that we were given is that, that is kind of a safe haven for them. And so you don't want to disturb them in an area that they gravitate to as a safe haven. They're also, some are protected. This is the first year, and again, it's a community science program. And I am betting Hillary probably has some really good insight as to that. These were the reasons that I was given.
So
Hillary, if you want to
monarchs
jump in.
during the overwintering period, that's when they are using like their energy stores. And so it's been identified as one of the most vulnerable parts of their life cycle. So we're hoping to not have folks out there like disturbing clusters or like disturbing the monarchs and make them expend more energy, which then could lead to higher mortality. So that's why we've selected that. But I mean, in Santa Barbara here in the Bay where I live, like there's so many monarchs on tropical milkweed right now. So like I do it not close to overwintering sites, but I'll tag monarchs on tropical milkweed. And then my hope is to find out if they show up there or if they just like stay in the resident population. So I think there's tons of data, but we're really, especially this year when monarchs at overwintering sites are so low, I'm really happy we have this. You know, what we did build into this permit that I think is unique is that we'll work with Gail from Southwest Monarch Project like every year and kind of adjust things. So, you know, at this point, like now that I've seen my kids able to do this, like I feel pretty confident adult volunteers can do it without harming monarchs. So I don't think even with the low numbers that we would adjust make it a smaller number of monarchs that could be tagged. Maybe we'll even go up. I think the thing I need to understand better is tier 2, and I didn't get training in that. And so that's probably my next phase is doing that and doing it myself just to check and then seeing how we can adjust it. But I think so far, like people have been participating and it's been really successful. So it's great. So thank you guys at the zoo for supporting it.
I guess my other follow-up question is, do you guys plan to like share your results or how will we know if you're seeing like what you're learning from the tagging project?
I mean, I know that Gail has been making her data available through the Southwest Monarch Study, and I absolutely encourage people to look them up. In fact, I'll put their website into the chat. So I'd imagine that Gail would be the person to release that data as it's been analyzed and becomes available for the public. She's made all of her other data publicly available. In terms of individual experiences, I mean, we're always happy to share. But it sounds like CDFW, I mean, Hillary, it sounds like you've been doing this too, and obviously it would be a great resource, and CDFW is partnering with Southwest Monarch City on this.
Yeah, thank you. Any other last questions or last comments before we end the meeting? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the VCRCD, we're not going to do our updates today. I'll send like an email out to everyone that just might include a link or two to some of our programs, but we'll probably present at the spring meeting. But thank you guys all for joining today and for your great questions and your engagement. We really appreciate it, and just sharing what we're all doing and what's working, what's not working. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.